And all right, thank you, everybody. We will go ahead and start today. It is my honor that we have Jennifer Palmer with us for Talk with Doc today. And today we will be talking on a topic that I think is extremely important for every single parent to hear, whether you have a child with disabilities or not. But our topic today is social media safety. So Jennifer, welcome. Why don't you go ahead and just take a couple minutes and introduce yourself.
Hi, guys. I'm Jennifer Palmer, and I live in Kansas City. I have been a nurse for 20 years this year, I guess, which seems ridiculous, but I am a sexuality and relationship educator for people with special needs, and I'm also a forensic interviewer, and I do a couple other little nurse community things going on. I sit on the board of Summit Future Foundation as the secretary. I do a lot of volunteer work with their teenage peer support groups. And my day job is I'm a pediatric case manager. So I'm also the parent of a young lady with Down syndrome. And so abuse, neglect, exploitation, safety, and, supporting our kids to make good decisions is super important to me. I guess I should say I am starting up a consulting business where I will offer all these educational things to people in the community, and that's set to launch next month. So,
yeah, it's wonderful, and we're happy to share that information with everyone and let them know. So, let's just kind of kick things off and kind of start where we're at. So, social media safety. What are some of where do we start? So many kids today and adults and everybody, social media is everywhere. They're doing everything. Internet's everywhere we go to. How do we start in protecting our kids? And if you want, I think your computer something might be on there.
mine?
Yeah, I hear a background, or maybe not. There we go. Okay, got it now. But what are some things that we could do to help out? Where do we start?
So it's from my perspective, social media is kind of a two-edged sword. It provides so much social supports for our kids and allows them to, especially with everything that's gone on in the last few months, be able to see their friends that they normally wouldn't get to and really strengthen those foundational relationships. But there is just some awareness that families need to be aware of. And so I put together a PowerPoint. Can we flip to that, Doc?
Yeah, let me pull up the screen here. Actually, you can share now if you want to.
Okay, let me see.
It's now allowing. That way you can run it.
Okay. I just want to make sure I have it pulled up. So just.
If not, I can pull it.
There we go. I don't know. Can we get rid of the things on this?
Just
this one here. There we go. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
All right. And like I said, it's super. So I just put this together mostly because I talk better from slides. So I always start off with risk factors because you can't reduce risks of anything if you're not aware of the factors and where our kids fall. So this is a list of some of the things. One of the things that when I was kind of starting to work in this area, the neurodiversity component was really obvious to me, and also multiple caregivers. And so even just having, we all use caregivers in some capacity, whether it's, having blended families or two homes for a child. That disconnect sometimes can be problematic. The high risk for social isolation for our kids makes our kids sometimes a little more susceptible to peer pressures and supports and wanting acceptance, and that can become a problem later on. We'll talk about that a little bit. And oversharing of personal information. And I think all kids and teenagers overshare at some point.
Yeah,
I know I did, and I wrote many, many sentences about what I should not share with people that were not in my immediate family. But setting those boundaries and helping our kids understand why that's important is part of knowing what's going on. Cognition and age and maturity, of course, are problematic. And for me, one of the things that I am always freaked out about is when apps and stuff that were designed for the 8 to 15 population have predatory people on those. So I always am like, ugh. So, know where your kid is going. We'll talk about that here in a second. Barriers to safety. So I am not super tech savvy.
Actually, Jennifer, if you want to, we're not seeing all that. We're just got your main screen right now for the slides, so we're missing your other slides. If you want to maybe hit the enable editing so it'll show everything there, and then go live or the main presentation so we can see all your slides. We're just on your original slide.
Well, that's not any fun. Okay, let me try this. Shared window is closed. Sorry, guys.
Or if you want, I can pull up. Yeah.
Are we good?
Yep. Now we got it. So now you can scroll through. There we go. That's the second slide now.
Okay.
Now we got it.
And I can't see the chat box, so I can't see if anybody's dinging in. So.
I'll let you know.
Okay. And so these are like what I just brought up. And then barriers to safety. I'm not super tech savvy, and I pretty much own that. There are settings on apps that say parental controls, but it doesn't necessarily filter out the unnecessary or undesired interactions that happen. Online predators, which I think is probably the top 5 worst parent nightmares. Fewer safeguards. Now the kids are using tech at school and at home. There's more, and everybody's friends have it, and so it's a lot more out that. Parental knowledge is what it is. Kids can be sneaky, and trying to keep them safe sometimes is a challenge, especially if you're not super tech savvy. Peer pressure, we'll talk about that a little bit more, and secrecy, which I think is the hallmark for every teen. Teen or young adult. What'd you say, Doc?
No, absolutely. Teens are known for the secrecy there. You got to always be aware there.
And so when I was putting this list together and trying to really felt like how I wanted to present this, it felt pretty negative, like I was saying that. But on the other side of that, knowing that these are the barriers and keeping that in mind, you can kind of mitigate some of that at the front end. And so that, for me, from a clinical perspective, that's always where I go, like, what are the risk factors and how can I mitigate those to do that? And so, secrecy, knowing that kids keep things secret and that is being used. So knowing how to have those conversations, and I think I included that. So one of the things is they're like, well, we just won't let them do that, and setting rules. And every family has to make the personal decision on what they're comfortable with their kid being exposed to. But these were some of the guidelines that I have found in some of the literature that I felt like, instead of saying never talk to somebody you don't know, how to talk about some of these other things. And so I wanted to kind of walk through this, talking about the dangers up front and being honest with your kids and the people that are in your life, and tell them that not everybody on there is who they say they are. And that kind of ties into the defined in real life, which IRL. I could do a whole thing just on all the abbreviations because it's just like a whole different dialect. But there's a fine line between scaring your kids, but making sure that they understand. So, and I kind of say, poison ivy is a thing. Nobody really wants to get it. And so we try to avoid it if we can, but knowing that it's out there and what'll happen it kind of makes people a little more cognizant of it, as much as their developmental levels will allow. In real life, this one is one that a lot of our folks struggle with because they're so used to caregivers and physicians and support staff and therapists and, you know, people that they come in contact with. They might feel like those are people that are, you know, known to them, and that might be fine. However, that people can also exploit other people's identities and use their pictures or use that as a trust building bridge, if you will, like, oh yeah, I know so and so that makes them feel safe enough to accept them and to carry on a dialogue. Right. And so personal information, this one is hard because everybody posts everything on social media, and if they aren't aware, they can disclose, I mean, not just for their own personal safety, but whole family safety. Like, I mean, burglary stuff and identity theft and, you know, bank information and other stuff like that. But people don't realize that some of the folks out there are very, very skilled at that and trying to, you know, get that information. Knowing your mom's work schedule, knowing that your dad's on vacation or your sister's at cheer practice and stuff that seems really benign can also, you know, it can also be a problem.
Absolutely. I've had some of my friends with disabilities, and they've shared on social media that they're home by themselves while mom and dad are at work, or, you know, sisters at cheer practice or something, you know, and that's, they're just asking for trouble. They don't think anything's wrong with that and don't see it, but that's where it's our job as parents to come alongside and help educate them. Absolutely. So we need to know that. That's a great point.
Well, and part of that is not just, I mean, we don't want our kids to get hurt, and that's the underlying main cause of it. But also, I mean, just the trauma of somebody breaking in when you're there, and you know, any of that kind of stuff is just, it totally freaks me out. And I'm always concerned because one of the some of the forensic stuff that I was working on, one of the places that people are very vulnerable are getting out of the car and getting into their houses at night. And I can totally relate to that because my kid takes forever to get out of the car, and then I got to get my purse, and then I got to get her bag, and we're here. It takes us like, you know, 15 minutes. And if somebody is looking to target somebody to do harm, they're going to look for those kinds of things. And so, especially when we're at home and we're in that safety zone, we're like, oh no, I'm in my own driveway, nothing's going to happen. Or I'm getting it out of and loading into the grocery store and that kind of stuff. All those transition in a different context, but transition places where we're going from. So be aware of all of that. And we get distracted by our environments when we're you know, working with our kids and helping them get in their car seats and all that sort of thing. Right. So I'm always like, just be safe about those kinds of things and err on the side of caution. So one of the other things I talk about is respecting the opinions of others. And if anybody's been on Facebook in the last 2 weeks, you will know that that is a problem, not just for our kids, but just people in general. And so talking about the diversity, and if you don't understand why somebody is saying that, you know, let's have a conversation about that, and opening up those conversations with our kids to say, if you don't understand why that's offensive, instead of typing it on Facebook and kind of bringing the bullies to them, you and I talk about it before you post. And kind of, you know, because a lot of it is lost in the nuance of things. And again, not all of it's valid. Some of, you know, there's opinions on whatever. And so using empathy when you're posting and you're sharing things, because while you might think it's really funny to videotape your sibling doing whatever, they might not be appreciative of that. And I really talk about with the next one, nudes and sexting. Once it's on the internet, even if you take it down, it's there forever. And that's a hard concept because it's a very abstract concept. And they're like, but no, I took it down. I understand that you feel like you did take it down. There's that concrete, abstract rationale there. That's really, really hard. And it's gotten a lot of teens in trouble in lots of ways. And it can be catastrophic. And so, I mean, my kid's 9, and so I'm pretty good to say sure or not she's not doing that, but she doesn't have a phone. But I mean, kids do it, and they get themselves in positions like with their peers and school bullying situations and online stuff that it's really, really hard for them to come back from.
And I would say as well, not just teaching them not to do it there, but I've also worked with families where, you know, the kids didn't put it online, but they did the sexting and just sent it over text.
Yeah.
Saying, well, it's not going out everywhere. I'm controlling who has it. But you have no control over what that person does with it.
Yeah.
And that person may put it up online, and then, like you said, it's everywhere forever.
If you don't want your grandma to see it, you don't take a picture of it.
Absolutely.
And it's funny, and I make jokes about it, but it's very serious, and it's really been, I mean, there's tons of research and stuff on how it's impacted people's mental health and impacted safety and some other things, and just caused catastrophic life outcomes. And so really just, but again, if you don't want your grandma to see it, then it's probably, you don't need to be taking a photo of it. And so, and phones can be hacked. I mean, people are, you know, or people can unlock your phone and forward it to everybody in the school. So again, if you don't want your grandma to see it, don't be taking a picture of it. So enforcing rules. So for me, guideline, there's a small difference between guidelines, which is teaching concepts, and enforcing rules. So every family has rules around social media and accessing electronics. So these are some of the things that you guys need to talk about among yourselves and your families, and figure out where your comfort level is. And I would encourage you to readdress these often. And as your kids, you know, are more mature and showing signs that they can handle the stress that comes on social media, because it's stressful, then you can expand what you're comfortable with. And so know what your kids are doing online, games and apps and social media. A lot of our kids can get through firewalls and school stuff that's on their devices to get into whatever they want to look at. Know a lot of the games and apps have chat features that are not monitored, and they just have to click and say that they're a certain age to get in, but that's easily bypassed. So that's really scary for me. Times and places for device use. I do not take my phone in my bedroom. That's my rule, because I'm not a good sleeper, so I don't want any of that blue light or whatever that stuff. But for teenagers, knowing that their phones are going to be not in their rooms at night, at bedtime, after hours and stuff, that might be something you decide to do. Again, it depends on what works for you guys in your own families. Know their passwords and spot check. I did this for my typical child. He knew at any time I could get into any of his accounts. Did I do it all the time? No, I did not, because he was very responsible. I really didn't have any problems with him with that. But knowing that, I think, kept him honest, especially if his friends were posting things that were inappropriate. He would be like, oh my gosh, Mom, he posted this and I did not do anything about that. That is not me. I did not think that, or I didn't want him to do it, or whatever, because he knew I would check up, and I was friends with all of his friends on Facebook and their parents, which was very helpful.
Right. And I think that's the other important. So two things. One, I think everything we're talking about here today doesn't just apply to, you know, our individuals with disabilities, but like you said, it does apply to all kids, period. Because it crosses all the board with everything. But I think we need to know the password for the devices, for all of our kids' devices, and do the spot checks with that. Absolutely. And with that. And like you said, we need to be friends with them on their social media. And that's the only way you really know what they're posting and what they're doing. So that's one way we can help keep them safe and see what's going on with that. So absolutely, great points.
Because we had a 9 o'clock rule when my son was in high school, that he had to take his phone to the kitchen to charge at 9 o'clock. And that's where it stayed. He had to turn it off, because
Yeah.
I wanted him to decompress and, you know, the sleep hygiene stuff. But I also didn't want him getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and seeing what everybody was doing and all of that sort of thing. And, you know, you get the whole, well, this is, you know, this is not, I'm like, it's my phone. I'm letting you use it. That's how I kind of was. But it was, you know, and I really didn't have to do a lot of it. I felt like at that point he was pretty self-regulating, which was good. But, you know, I mean, there's always stuff that's out there that other kids are into, and include yours and all that, and kind of nipping that. But, and then having an honest conversation about nudity. And it's a hard one. It's really, really hard to have these conversations. And especially there's always, if you ask your teenage kids, has there been a new photo of somebody in your class? They will tell you there is, because it's out there. And asking them, you know, how did that impact them? And it's not just girls, it's boys too. And, you know, and saying, how did that impact them? Is that, I mean, was it a good, I mean, what's your impression of that person now? And what do you think is going to happen when they go to do whatever and that's used against them? And kind of make them understand that there's not only issues now and it can be used, but even later on in life. And now stuff is coming up on background checks for college and job interviews, and I mean, the whole Google thing. And so, again, having them understand that once it's out there, and I think that online there's some examples of that where kids can see how that has blown up and really has come back. And having those conversations that that's something that they save or never engage in, or whatever, you know, however you guys feel like that's the safest way to talk about it with your kids. But there's a lot of peer pressure there. And if you go back to some of the manipulative tactics, a lot of those kids that have had issues were really coerced into that. So knowing that, and ask them, what would you do if somebody in a chat room asked you to text them privately and asked for pictures of your breasts or whatever? How would you handle that? And so for some of our kids, the repetition and the prep of it all can really diminish the onslaught of problems. They feel much more confident and assertive in their decisions when they say, no, I don't do that. Versus there's a whole lot of difference in, no, my mom doesn't want me to do it, and no, I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Right.
So in kind of supporting that is always a good thing. So everybody's like, oh, we'll use parental controls. So there's mixed reviews and mixed evidence on that. Some people feel like you can block inappropriate content, like certain curse words or phrases. You can track activity and track location. There's definitely pros to all of that. The other side of that, though, is, I just put it on 2 slides because I thought it'd be easier. They're not all of the parental control, and especially some of the apps, are not necessarily efficient. They can be fraudulent. They can not do anything. Some of them are pricey. And then you get into the impact of the trust of the child and parent relationship. Sometimes I feel like parental controls, if your kid knows that you're using them, they expect you to police their activity. It depends on your kid. It depends on how you are as a parent. It depends on, you know, how open your communication is, and, you know, how your family talks about these kinds of things. Some families never talk about stuff. Other people, and I'll totally own that, nurse families pretty much talk about all this stuff. We have like, no, we're like, has anybody taken sent you a sex picture? And they're like, no. Why would you ask that? I'm like, I'm just asking. And they're like, okay. And that's the whole conversation. But knowing that that is going to come up at some point, sometimes that can, and so there's, again, it just depends on where your values lie, and if that is something that you're willing to work on,
right,
or work with. And the parental controls really, again, most of our older teens can get around those. So I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on that, because it's just like, it just depends on where you're at. Cyberbullying. This one's a hard one. It's really, really hard. I pulled this statistic out that says 20 to 30% of students will experience cyberbullying, which is horrific. So like 1 in 3. The other part of that is this: 10 to 20% are the bullies. And so acknowledging that your kid might be one of those kids and has engaged in these kind of, openly, overtly aggressive manners is really, again, you can't deal with it if you don't know. And so how to manage that. And then, our, kids that have, challenges, they tend to be a little more, the video about the girl in Illinois this week just about ripped my guts out. Yeah. It's horrific that somebody would physically harass somebody and bully them like that. The thing is about cyberbullying is it seems to be very insidious. It's a slow progression a lot of times. It's oftentimes from people that they know and people that they consider friends. And so, again, monitoring that's going on and really opening up that conversation. This is a great article, by the way. That's one of the reasons I put it in here so you guys could reference it later. So if your kid tells you that they're having trouble, and they say this has happened, the number one thing that you cannot do is freak out. Do not overreact. And I will tell you, I totally understand it's really, really hard. It's the same with any kind of disclosure. If somebody says somebody's being mean to me at school, or they're saying bad things on me on Facebook, or somebody touched me inappropriately, it's almost always the same process. Cyberbullying, though, there's a few extra steps, but you just have to listen and don't be judgmental, which I am sitting here and telling you is really, really, really hard.
Right.
Just not freak out, because you want to scream and just threaten the other parents and the other kids, and I will take care of this. But you have to breathe and let them kind of work through it. Ask them, small questions. Did you, when did this start? Who else is involved? How does that make you feel? Did you tell anybody else at school? And trying to get those details out of them without it being a grill session, which is hard. It's hard because you want to know right now so you can get on it and you can try to work on it. Acknowledge that it's painful and isolative. Tell them that they did the right thing by talking about it. If it is very uncomfortable and it's explicit, they might not want to talk to you about it. They might want to talk to somebody else about it. And that might be your other parent or partner. It might be a counselor at school or a mental health professional. And I mean, you want them to tell you, but if it's graphic, I get that. And at a certain age, their privacy becomes a concern. So I would let them lead there. I would try to open that up and be an open, receptive person to take that. And I feel like most of the time they do talk to the parents in their own time, but sometimes it takes a professional support to talk to them, especially if it's been over years or it's really intimate, then there's problems there.
Right.
Discerning the scope of the issue. Did you have something to say?
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
Agreeing.
Discern the scope of the issue. If it's a girl from her cheer squad that's telling her one negative thing, that I feel like would be handled versus an onslaught of an entire team. So knowing, and then you get into the whole kids are kids thing, and some of that might be true, but it just really depends. It doesn't lessen the severity and how they receive and process that. Was there any retaliation? This is a hard one. This is a really, really hard one because, you need to make sure that they understand that if somebody sends you a nasty text or a request and you say no, and then there's some bullying issues, they have the power to use the 3 little magic buttons, is what I call them, the block button, and they have to process that. You don't need to engage that. You need to report it and close it down. And I feel like our kids really struggle with that because they want acceptance and they want to be perceived as a friend. And they are. A lot of our kids do have really great friendships. But on the other side of that is they lash out because they're hurt. And I get that. And sometimes that can just aggravate it and perpetuate it and explode it. So knowing, and having those conversations again before issues can really mitigate a lot of this. Right. Address the issues, may need counseling supports, reducing the risk of ongoing or additional attacks. What will you do the next time? who, if you don't want to talk to me about it, who could be your person that you can talk to about that? And how would you reach out to them? You know, you can go to the school counselor, you know, you can call your grandma or whoever, you know, however your support systems are built, to try to let them know that it's okay as long as they're getting the support they need, that they don't necessarily. And some of that is building self-determination skills and assertiveness skills that can help them in a lot of other areas as well. I feel like I'm going too fast. Is there any questions?
No, you're doing fine. And yeah, with that, if anyone that's watching, whether you're on the webinar or you're watching on Facebook Live, if you have questions, go ahead and put them on the webinar in the chat or the Q&A, and on Facebook Live, you can put them in the comments, and we'll be happy to be answering your questions as they come in. But go ahead. You're doing good. And you know, the one thing I'd say, just kind of echoing, this is all fabulous information. One thing I'd want to challenge our parents and remind them, and it's one thing I know a lot of parents fight with, but our job is to be a parent, not to be our child's friend. And I think a lot of times, you know, parents feel that, oh, they want to be their child's friend, they want their child to like them, so they won't try to do some of these things. Oh, I don't want to check my child's phone, I want them to trust me, you can't do that. You know, we need to be an advocate for our kids. We need to keep them safe. And it's our job as a parent to do that. And we are the parent. We have to step in and do that and make some of the tough decisions. You know, we love our kids, and that's why we have to make sure we're keeping them safe. They just don't have the experience. They don't have the understanding to know all the risk that is out there. And we know a lot of the things that are there. So it's our job to not look at this as being friends and not look at this as, oh, I may be hurting my child. We need to look at it as, I'm protecting my child, and I don't want anything to happen to him or her, whether they have a disability or whether they're typical or whatever the case is. It's our job to help protect our kids. And so it's taking a lot of these issues. One, being aware that this all is out there and exists, because there are just, you know, lack of a better word, there are just nasty people out there who are actively trying to prey on our kids. And it's our job to help make sure that our kids are protected best of our ability. So yeah, go ahead, and as questions come in, we'll be bringing those up.
So that's all true, and it's hard. It's a hard time to be a parent in general. It's just, and our kids have so many, you know, there's so many places in their days that leave them open to vulnerability. And I mean, again, social media can be a great tool. I mean, it's more and more of our kids are able to work and have, you know, more social interactions and, you know, Zoom meetings and all these things, as, you know, the COVID stuff has shown that it can really be a great tool. But like, and I liken a lot to driving a car. Driving a car can be safe or it can be dangerous, and it's all in how you use it and all in the maturity level of your kid. And are they responsible? Some kids are just responsible by nature, and some are just impulsive by nature.
Right.
And so I used to tell my son that all the time, and he's like, I'm not a statistic. And I'm like, but you are still 21 and your car insurance is still high. Because it's a statistical. And so we used to have I mean, it's funny now because he's grown, but then, you know, but there's some reality there that we really need to just use it as a tool. But it is okay to walk sometimes or take the bus if that's better for you at that time. So one thing that I do not see out there a lot that I cannot stress enough is social media manners. There's, like I just said, positives of social media and online groups. They can make great friends, especially if I've had lots of families that have said that if they didn't have, you know, the Facebook group that they were in, they wouldn't know what to do about whatever. And they meet people nationally and internationally that have really, you know, had the same rare diagnosis, and that make them feel really supported. So there are a lot of positives to it. But so I would definitely talk about manners, and sometimes, again, this could be for a lot of people, setting a good example by your posts, discussing discuss managing emotions privately before posting. And that's, I think, especially applicable to teenagers because they get mad and people post something that irritates them and they want to shoot back. And then the next thing you know, they're getting bullied and it's just really gone out. And so really trying to not be reactive and, again, opening that doorway to conversation and say, hey, can you read this? Does it sound too snarky or whatever? And do that. Respecting others and their privacy. That is, again, exactly what it is. I mean, don't post embarrassing things about your siblings or your parents, especially your mom. But, I mean, you know, and respecting that other people might not want all their details out there. How to deal with an online conflict, because if they're on social media, they'll eventually have a conflict, and how to manage that in a positive way. And how to be a good digital citizen and just, you know, be positive and, you know, vent appropriately. And every time when I was reading this, all I kept thinking about is when you watch a TV show and they pull up somebody's social media and then they're getting arrested because they posted all this stuff. And I was like, see, people watch what you post. And I feel like what's going on in the world right now, I mean, people are posting stuff that I'm just appalled at. And I mean, people are entitled to their own opinions about whatever, but realizing that might hurt other people's feelings deliberately or accidentally. So they just need to kind of own that. And I feel like if they don't have a concept of some of these processes, then maybe they're not ready to be online.
Yeah, and I think this is great, and it applies to adults as well. But the other thing that's important, you kind of hinted on it, is, you know, things that our teens post can affect them many years later. You know, we've heard so many stories on how, you know, something was found that, you know, someone posted on Twitter or Facebook and, you know, came out later. I can speak for myself. You know, when I interview someone for a job, one of the first things I do is pull up all their social media and go through their social media to see that. And that's, I don't know a single employer now that doesn't do that. So that's just part of it. And if you see things on social media that, you know, alarm you, that can prevent you from hiring a very good candidate. So social media plays a huge role.
And the vast majority of employers have social media policies. So even if you post a photo that's inappropriate or they feel it's inappropriate, that can still jeopardize your job. Or somebody tags you in a photo, which is another part. Because if you're not on there a whole lot as an adult and, you know, your neighbor posts a picture of you, whatever, and tags you on it, that'll show up in a thing, but you might not even realize it because you're not on there every day.
Right.
And so, and then I included, these are some statistics and some stuff, how to stomp out bullying, some education, and, you know, how to kind of work through some of all of that. And that is all of the content. That's it.
Great information. So we do have one question that has come in that we want to talk about. So one of the first questions is, are there websites that are safe for teenagers to be going to? And I know that's kind of a broad, general question out there, but any specific websites that you know that are good and safe for teenagers to be going to?
It depends on what you're looking for and what you're using internet for and whatever. I always make jokes at work. They're like, what's the state? I'm like, go to the CDC website. It's guaranteed to cure your insomnia, and there's never anything good on it or dirty or whatever. But I mean, if you're looking for social media, like a networking group or stuff like that, there's, I would look for, I mean, a lot of them have been linked to a lot of different nefarious things. It just really depends. And it depends on, because, you know, there's apps now that have unmonitored texting. And, I mean, kids are sneaky. They like to, you know, text their friends and then uninstall it when they're on the bus home and then reinstall it the next morning. And so it just really depends on what kind of a platform your kid is looking for. I mean, it's my opinion that the vast, like 99% of them can be safe. It's also that like 90% of them can be shady if they're given the right opportunity and the right thing. So, I mean, there's not really a hard and fast rule, I don't think.
Yeah. Another question that came in is they've got a teenager and they check their teenager's phone and apps, like you said. But there are now these apps out there that have hidden things in it.
Chats.
How do you find that? Like I'm aware there's like a calculator app that, if they put in the code in the calculator, all of a sudden it opens, this whole section that may be all porn or something like that, or something for sexting. Those are hard for parents to find when they're so well hidden, and we've got these app makers now targeting teens.
Right.
Is there somewhere that you can find out about these, or how do you go about learning about that?
There's quite a few. One of the articles I think had on here, I put on there, had maybe not. I had a list of, really a tracking app. A mirror app is really the only way you're going to be able to track that. And yeah, other parents have caught stuff like data dumping and some other things, but it's really, I don't know that there's an answer. I really don't. I know other people, you can install and see every site that your kid goes on or downloads, and you can put stuff on like the app stores, but you really will have to do some ancillary research and kind of, and on the other hand, it could be a full-time job to follow your kids' social media and follow what they're doing. So I think it's a fine line between supporting them to make good decisions, and sometimes they have to make the mistakes themselves, but.
Right. And I think, kind of seconding, going along with that, it's one thing that we do with our kids. We've got our apps all set up that before they can before my son can download an app on his phone, I have to approve it.
Right.
So, it goes through where, our accounts are linked, and I have to approve that app on there. He doesn't like it, and he gets upset, especially when, sometimes I say, no, you don't need that, or you've got plenty of video games. You don't need another one.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been also some other apps that I'm concerned with because he doesn't understand some of the other things that are behind it that are being done with it. And so I'm like, no, I've got concerns for X, Y, Z. And so it's not, I think we need to, as parents as well, not just block and say we're blocking, but explain and have those conversations with our kids too through process. But now let's talk about, we've got a child who has intellectual disability. How can you help them understand, especially the importance of not sharing too much information, not sharing their address, not sharing that parents aren't home, all those things that you had talked about earlier. What are ways that we can help empower parents to have those conversations to help our individuals who are intellectually disabled with that?
I would say always look for a learning opportunity that can correlate to what they understand in real life. So if you're watching a movie and it's about somebody being sex trafficked or something, SVU or whatever, say, do you understand that this is a part of this, then this could be a part of the problem, and see if they can make that jump. And I'm also, you're going to laugh, I'm a big believer in the cheat sheet. If you've got a kid that tends to get overly impulsive or maybe doesn't understand some abstract, I would put on a list of what you can share and what you shouldn't share and make it very obvious. And so when they're in the moment and they're caught up, and maybe they can use that as a reference. It might be oversimplified, but you don't, and explain to them the why part. Why it's not okay to give somebody your passwords. Right. Why it's not okay to tell them that your mom is working late, or why it's okay not to tell them that you're going on vacation, or and even as much as, honestly, posting what school, elementary school they're in and some other things that can open up. There is a lot of stuff out there.
Absolutely.
So, and because if they have the child's first and last name or the parent's name, they can get into a state website like CaseNet and pull up addresses. If you know how to work it. And so I've had some disclosure that people seek out young women that have had newly appointed guardians and friend them on social media for relationships because the rate of prosecution is less. So people are devious. And like you
Right.
said, they're nasty. They're
Yeah.
just, there's some really bad people out there. And I don't think everybody on social media is bad. And I don't think everybody trying to be friends with our families is bad. But I'm also, I worked in psych nursing for a long time, so I tend to be a little skeptical in the whole I don't know you. But you know, I would encourage your kids not to add a bunch of people on their Facebook that they have not met in person, and explain to them what that means. That you've been to their house, that I know them, or whatever, and how that works.
Right.
And I would just say, you know, if that person's okay with me being their friend too, that might be enough of a deterrent for somebody that was, you know, posing as as a child or a peer to go away. That's fine. I can friend you, but my mom will have to friend you too.
Right.
And I feel like, I mean, that would be a pretty big deterrent if I was a creep.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And again, you know, it's okay if we make some of these steps difficult for our kids, because we're trying to protect them. You know, that's the bottom line. Another question that came in is, any ideas for wholesome social media, and something like maybe GodTube or something like that. You know, what are your thoughts on any wholesome social media out there?
I think it just depends on where your preferences are. I myself have private chat groups with friends that we talk about all kinds of stuff that we wouldn't necessarily post publicly, just because it's like, what do you do with this? And you know, I don't want to put all my stuff out there either. It just really depends. As long as it's vetted and you find it to be safe, especially if you're on there with them, I feel like that is probably the best case scenario. Um, and I would always bring up that if people try to, anytime you isolate a child away from a group, then that would be a red flag for me. And so I would say, if they can't talk to me too, or they want to talk to you privately, you need to tell me that that's going on. So at least you're cognizant of it. And it might be benign, and that's great. I would love to get in my kids' text messages and find that they were talking about a video game and what kind of pizza they like. That would make me super happy. And not anything inappropriate. And so I feel like just kind of knowing that they could be monitored is a pretty big deterrent.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, thinking through all that again. You know, what do you think is, you know, and I know this question came in, but it kind of varies from family to family. And so, you know, first I'd say in answering this one is, everyone needs to do what's right for their family. But the question is, what age do you think is appropriate for a child having, you know, their own cell phone?
There's a lot of mixed reviews on it. And I think it depends. For me, the phone is just, it's in a piece of equipment. And so it depends on what they're going to have access to. They have some really great phones that are strictly phone calls, like flip phones and YouTube, and that's it. Or
Right.
flip phones and Netflix, which is even better. But I mean, you know, just really small that you can control it, that are designed for preteens. And I feel like those are pretty safe. And it depends. It depends on what they're accessing. It depends on how curious they are about other things. You know, for a typical kid, I think a typical kid could be safe around 8 or 10. For a kid with a delay, it really just depends. I mean, the other side of that is, if you have a kid with a developmental disability that has verbal challenges, you can track them through that, but that's only if they have it on their person. And so there's other tech out there for that, and tech is changing so super fast. It's really hard to say. My daughter is nonverbal, and despite all the conspiracy theories about tracking kids, if she continues and her speech doesn't develop where I feel like she can safely tell people, then I don't know if we won't go the tracking route. Mm-hmm. And you know, her dad and I disagree on that. He's like, well, then they can track her. I'm like, that's the point. They can find her if I can't. And so again, it's two sides to every coin. So you have to sort out what's important. But again, it depends on if you have controls set up that they can't download an app without you being notified or approved. Definitely don't put anything with your credit card number on their phone, please.
Oh, right. Absolutely. Yes.
My kid got an iPad and ordered some stuff off of Amazon on accident. So we got it right in the first 20, first hour, so we could cancel it all, but still it could have been a whole different thing. So, but again, it's so much of this is fluid, and it's so much of it is child and family specific. It's really hard to give and that's the rub, and that's what I hope your takeaway is none of this is hard and fast. It just gives you some guidelines and tells you what like is out there, and kind of you guys, I mean, it needs to be a family decision.
Right. Yeah. Question then came in with that. You're talking about tracking apps or tracking things. Is there one out there that you recommend?
I do not. I have not researched that enough to give an opinion. I know that only works if they keep their phone with them. And there's still ways around it. Kids have discovered a way to cheat their parents out of that too sometimes. So they trade phones with a friend, or they leave their phones there and then they're off without a phone. And so there's not an answer to that. I would encourage you. Parents Magazine honestly has a lot of really good articles about stuff like this. And I feel like it isn't necessarily sales based, so they can give you some better ideas.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead speaking on. We use one, and it's called Life 360, and it's a very good one. We just use the free app. I'm too cheap to pay the extra part with it, but it works great. It is, like you said, as long as they keep their phone with them, because it's working with the phone, and it helps if they have their Wi-Fi on. My son doesn't always like to have his Wi-Fi on, so it doesn't track as well. But that's a great one as far as knowing where everyone's at. When they come home, when they leave. I know when they get to work, when they, so on and so forth. My wife and I are both on it, and it's just a way that we can know where everyone's at without really invading anyone's privacy too much. But if you want to pay, you can even get in further when you got older teens and they're driving. It'll give you driving information and all kinds of things there. But that's a pretty good app that's going to help you with the tracking aspect on things. So, well, Jennifer, we're coming up on the top of the hour here. Any kind of final parting things, just in helping our parents know how best to protect their kids, whether they're children with disabilities or whether they're their typical child. What's some of the first steps they should do leaving today's talk?
It's easy to get. Even when I was doing the presentation, I felt the weight of that, and I was like, gosh, this is all so doom and gloom. And I don't want people to feel like that is all, our kids are so vulnerable, we have to keep them in a glass case or anything like that. And this I feel like so much of this is, for years we kept our kids isolated and secluded, and now that we're including them and they're living in the community and having a more full life, that these are just things that we need to address like we do with all of our kids. And I feel like but awareness and being very honest with them about that without scaring them is, most of our kids aren't scared to get in the car. They know that they need to wear their seatbelt. And so I would kind of, but it has to be an ongoing conversation. And give yourself some grace, because there's going to be trial and errors. If you feel like something's off, it probably is. That's the other thing. Most of our parents can tell if their kids' demeanor shift. And sometimes, you have to ask questions, and kids are not forthcoming, especially teenagers. They don't want to talk about it, or they're embarrassed. And so, and honestly, I have a lot of families call me and they're like, can you just talk to them? Because they won't tell me. And I'm like, well, I can't do anything with you in the room because they're not going to tell me anything. And
Right.
so, and I would encourage your kids that are getting older, make sure they understand that they can disclose issues to their people at their pediatrician's office and their counselors and things, and give them the space to do that. And that's hard because you want to know what's going on. But a lot of people, especially if you have really good nurses and doctors, they'll ask those questions. But I would say, I'm going to step out and give you a few minutes to talk about some personal things and kind of build that little bit of a boundary there for yourself and for them. And they might not disclose anything, or they might tell the provider that. So it's hard to let that go because you want to control it. I get it. I totally get it. But And then as they're older and they're 18 and they're 20 and they're, you know, talking about moving out on their own or having a boyfriend or all of that kind of crazy stuff that I can't even wrap my head around, those processes and boundaries are going to be set up for safeguards for them for long term. And that's what it is. It's a long, drawn out thing. It's not, you can't use this app and you can, but why is that not a good decision for you? And really encouraging them to kind of grow some of those skills and intuitions. So.
Right. That's great advice. And I completely second wholeheartedly everything you just said about the doctor's office, and especially being a pediatrician. You're speaking to my heart there. But you're absolutely right. Let the doctors, you know, talk to your kids and give them that privacy so that the kids will be more open. And parents, you'd be surprised how open and honest your kids will be with a doctor when you're not in the room. So, you know, do that. The other thing I want to say, you know, kind of in closing is, remember, there's a lot of good that can happen on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like Jennifer's saying, this isn't all doom and gloom. You know, social media is a huge part of every teen's life. But, you know, we need to also remember, though, that we need to know what social media they're on. And it may not be the social media that you're the most aware of. You know, as parents, most parents are more familiar with Facebook. Well, that's not the social media of today's, you know, teens. You know, they're doing more of the TikTok. They're doing more of the, you know, Snapchat and some of that. They're not even doing as much Instagram as they used to. That's still there. But, you know, so that might mean you need to learn more about these other types of social media so that you know how to talk with them, how to check and go through things. So it's not just knowing the Facebook, the Twitter, or the Instagram. No, today there are multiple other social media avenues, and it's just knowing all of those. The last thing I would say is don't forbid your kids from being on social media. That's not the right answer either. You know, because if you completely forbid them from being on it, I think you're going to find that they're going to still end up getting on it. So if you have these honest conversations and you work with them and help them through it, you're going to have that honest and open communication. And that's the most important thing we want. And again, as parents, we're not our kids' friends. We're their parents, and we need to come alongside them and help them through this whole process. But, you know, Jennifer, it's been fabulous. A lot of great information that I know all of our families are going to be able to apply and take and use. I'm excited. Jennifer is going to be with us for our Wonderfully Made conference. She's going to be doing a couple of talks for us that's going to be coming up in October. It's going to be virtual, and we're going to have registration for that opening up here in July, so be watching for that. We encourage you to partner with us. If you'd like to partner with us, you know, go ahead and join us. You can, especially if you want to help us financially to keep our Talk with Doc webinars going, you can go to soarspecialneeds.org/donate. Again, it's SOAR, SOAR. And we'd love to have you participate and join us with that. Next week, our talk is going to be a little different. And I got to admit, it's going to be a curveball for me. Our topic is going to be soaring with adversity, or soaring from adversity. And it's actually going to be, I'm coming out of the seat of host, and I'm going to become the guest. My chairman of the board, John Harris, is going to be interviewing me, and I'm going to be sharing how I've overcome the death of a child, loss of 2 careers, to be able to go through all that adversity and then develop an organization like SOAR and share what we're doing with SOAR and the vision with that. So I hope you can join us next week for Soaring from Adversity, the story of Doc and SOAR. And you know, it'll be an interesting time. I'll be in a little bit different position, being on the other side of things here, not being the one asking the questions but answering them. But it'll be a great week. And again, thank you so much, Jennifer. Loved having you. We'll be getting this posted up on our YouTube page, so encourage everyone to share that with all their family and friends, because this truly is a talk that needs to be heard by every single parent. So Jennifer, thank you so much for today.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
guys.
Everyone have a marvelous week. And again, every father who is out there, happy Father's